Hello, 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 ladies and gentlemen. Hey, my little doggy right there. Welcome back. Spring break. Welcome back. That's interesting. Anyway, hope everybody's safe. Hope everybody's doing okay. Hope everybody's getting used to it and in a good rhythm. All right, just want to talk about a quick couple things before we go through the slides for today. We're going to be doing more of the same. So I find this really easy to do for you, for me, for everybody. Putting up these slides, learning a little something about something every day, having you write a little something, having you do a little something, quizzing a couple times here and there. Uh, the grades that are in gradebook now, those are the ones I'm going to use for third cycle. So they're all in except for the one genetic engineering essay thing that you're supposed to write. So I'll be putting that in today or tomorrow, but nothing else. So the stuff that you're doing today, still collecting, still grading, stuff you do today will be for fourth cycle, and anything else from this point on will be for fourth cycle. Not next time we meet. I think we meet again Thursday or something. But the next time, so we really only meet twice a week, right? Most of the time. So a week from today, we'll have a quiz, but I will talk about that more in the next one, our next meeting, which I think is Thursday. All right, or Friday. So anyway, third cycle should be set. You need to remember, and I keep saying the same things over and over at the beginning of these videos, you need to private message me if you've done something late, right? I don't go back and say, oh, this person didn't. I don't, there's 110 kids. I don't remember who didn't do this and that and this and that and this assignment and that assignment. I go back and check. That's not what I do. I grade them. I give you enough time to do them, and then I grade them. If you didn't do it, by the time I graded it, there's a 0 in there or a 5 or something to indicate to you and to me that, hey, they didn't do this yet. I usually shoot you a private message at that time saying, hey, do this. When you're done with it, you need to private message me. Say, hey, Graph, done a little late, but it's in. Check it out. No problem. And I'll go in, I'll grade it, and we're all good. All right. If you don't do that, I'm not going to change it. And then it'll be a problem when you say, I did do it, like 2 months from now. So chill out with that. Take care, be responsible, take care of your own grade. Let me know how that's going. If there's any issues, needs to be worked out in the next day or two. I am here all day. I sign on at 8 o'clock, even earlier today, 7:30, and I'm here all day. So, you can always private message me. I'll get it within an hour. I'm getting a lot of different things. So, by the time I cycle through everything and everybody, it's usually about an hour, a little under an hour, but I will see your email. I usually don't finish and sign off until about 3:30, and then I usually am bored off my face, so I'll check once in the evening around 7 or 8. So I'm always available. That's the point. All right, still going to stick with these live things, and there's a bunch of reasons for that. One of the reasons is I'm noticing that there's not a huge population of people watching at this very moment for most of my classes. Some of my classes I'll have 4 or 5 or 6 watching, which is great. That's fine, watching it live. The reason why I have to do it live is just in case you have a question, real-time issues that you don't want to private message and wait for it. Just in case you have something, you can pop on the live and you can talk to me. And while we go through the slides, you can ask questions and all that stuff. So that's why I'm doing that. The biggest part of it is that it automatically records and it automatically puts it right on the classroom, which is super convenient because most of you, by the end of the day, I go back to these videos on all of my classes and I check the views, and there's, 20, 25 views. So everybody's doing it, which I appreciate. You might not be doing it this very second, but you're getting to it. And I'm cool with that. If the work's getting done, I'm cool with that. All right. Anyway, let's get to the slides. So you should have the slides up. We're doing it the same way, more of the same for the whole fourth cycle, hopefully, until we get back, at least, I hope. We are looking at the slides. So the slides. We have been talking about agriculture. So before spring break, we talked about a whole bunch of different things that had to do with agriculture. We talked about the Green Revolution. We talked about crop rotation and how we tried to make more food on the same land. We talked about the genetic engineering and GMOs, right? We talked about irrigation, water usage, right? We talked about pros and cons of all these different things. And now we're touching on something that we are all familiar with, I believe, and that's pesticide usage. So we're going to look at the cost and benefits of pesticide use. So when I go to slide 2, that is the agenda. I'll let you look at that at your leisure. Then we go to slide 3. Slide 3 is a review slide about the stuff we've already done. So we know that arable land, there's a couple vocabulary words here I'm not sure if you know. Arable land is land with nutritious soil on it that you're able to grow things on. Okay, so arable land becomes a desert, right? That just means the soil is no longer nutrient rich enough to grow things, right? Due to a variety of causes. So it says discuss how each could lead to desertification. Desertification is when when land goes from arable to desert, right? That's the process called desertification. And then you see a bunch of blue stuff down there. You see deforestation. You see a whole bunch of different things that we've mentioned in the last couple of weeks. So that's a review. You can go to that. You can look at some of those things and get that in your head because, of course, when we come around for the quiz, we didn't quiz on that yet. So that's going to be part of our quiz next week. There is a very good Smithsonian article on the link here that you can click and read at your leisure if you feel like it. And then in the comment notes and the speaker notes down bottom, there's some interesting remarks as well if you want to check out. So that's a review slide. Slide 4 is the objective. The objective for slide 4 is obviously explain the cost and the benefits of pesticide use. All right, so that's what we're going to be chatting with. I got this weird reflection going on today in my glasses with the screen, so I'm just going to have to deal with it. All right, moving on to slide 5. Slide 5 is the definition, the textbook definition of a pesticide. All right, I know we all know what a pesticide is, and I know we all go to, it's poison or it's chemicals or whatever. And, a lot of that is true. But to get the right definition, the proper definition is important. So a pesticide is any substance, usually a chemical substance, used to kill, repel, or control a certain form of plant or animal life that are considered to be pests. Okay, so we're dealing with living things, plants and animals. And if they are a pest, which means if they're in an environment where you don't want them or they shouldn't be, or they're damaging an environment, a pesticide is any substance that can be used to kill, repel, or control them. All right, so that is the textbook definition of a pesticide. Now, when you go to slide 6 puts them into subcategories, right? So when you say pesticide, right? Pest, we know what a pest is, something unwanted. That side, the end of that word is pretty obvious when you think of depressing terms like suicide, genocide, right? You see getting rid of something, right? So a pesticide is something that gets rid of pests. There are different types of pesticides. One is herbicides, right? Now we know herbs are vegetation, plants, right? So when you're using something to control weeds in your garden or kill some sort of vegetation, any kind of plant material, you're using an herbicide, special chemicals. There are different types of chemicals that they use for insecticides. Insecticide is my favorite Nirvana album. Insecticides control a wide variety of insects, okay? So when you want to control ants, when you want to control, insecticides are what they use most of the time on crops. When you ever see crop dusting where planes fly across these huge farms and they dump chemical pesticides all over the crops, that's usually an insecticide because insects are the ones that damage crops like that outside. There are fungicides. They are used to prevent the growth of mold and mildew. You use these if you ever see anybody spray, that whole mildew remover on tiles in your bathroom or whatever, if anybody does that in the shower, those have fungicides in them. They are used to get rid of mold and mildews. So those are living things, and that is how they control them. And then there's disinfectants. So these last two are things that we use. Now, not all pesticides are that horrible, horrible, horrible thing you think of when you think of, super poisonous, you touch it, you lick it, you die. That's not necessarily true because they're all designed to kill some different type of living organism, right? So fungicides, mold, and mildew, that doesn't hurt us too much. I mean, you don't want to drink it, but it's not too dangerous for us. And then disinfectants. Disinfectants are a type of pesticide. We have disinfectants everywhere in your kitchen, your bathroom, everywhere, right? Disinfectants are for, even our soaps, are for preventing the spread of bacteria. Bacteria are living things. When we don't want bacteria, we use pesticides, aka disinfectants, to get rid of them, right? So there's a bunch of subcategories of pesticides, and you should know those. And they're pretty self-explanatory. There is a sound clip at the bottom of this slide. Sound clip's a few minutes, talks about crop spraying, It's very interesting. Listen to them at your leisure. That's why I'll stop early. So you'll have about 20 minutes to go through the couple of sound clips throughout this and also the couple of videos. So the sound clip is, I forgot what it was, a couple minutes. But you do need to listen to them because you never know when a question is going to pop up on a quiz that has to do with one of these things. So I'll let you do that at your leisure. Moving on to slide 7. Slide 7. All right. So when we use pesticides, right? Let's now I'm thinking more along the lines of agriculture and spraying crops down with pesticides. When we do that, most of the time, sometimes, many of the times, pesticides will do what they're supposed to do, remain in the plant and soil, and they'll break down over time, right? So once they break down to their individual components, they don't become as dangerous. So we believe, right? But the problem is sometimes pesticides don't break down fully, right? Sometimes their byproducts drift into the air. Sometimes they flow through the soil, right? And sometimes they become part of the water cycle. They even get in the water supply. So when that happens, there's a term for that, and they call that bioaccumulation. All right, they can bioaccumulate. They can add up instead of just breaking down and disappearing. And the problem with that is it can be very dangerous for us. So when you are thinking about a plane going over and crop dusting with all these pesticides over a farm, think about living a mile away from that farm and think about having strong winds that day, right? Some of these pesticides are going to get blown into the atmosphere and float around, easily breathed in by humans and other living things, right? And that can be a big problem for anyone, but it can be especially a big problem for pregnant people, pregnant mothers, pregnant women, because they can easily pass that on to their fetus. Those chemicals and the amount of chemicals that an adult can take is a lot different than the amount of chemicals that would affect a small child, right? So because of the widespread use of these chemicals when we're producing food, humans are just naturally exposed to low levels of pesticides through their diets. Right? We're going to talk about more about that later on in a few slides, but you can't get away from ingesting these things, and that's an interesting fact. But we'll get through that, or we'll get to that in a few minutes. Moving on to slide 8. Slide 8 is interesting because we know that as soon as things start becoming a problem, and as soon as humans start saying, "Hey, there's got to be a problem with this stuff," the EPA steps in, right? The Environmental Protection Agency. And what the EPA does is they set limits on the amount of pesticides that can be on each food item. All right. But there's a huge problem that they don't control. And this is what this slide is saying. The slide is saying that the EPA comes in and says, okay, you're allowed, this is the safe level of pesticide A on food. So you cannot have more than pesticide A, this much pesticide A on your food. This is the safe label for A. Okay, great. Oh, pesticide B, if you use pesticide B, here's your safe level here. So you can't have any more of it on there. We're going to control that and make sure that there's not this much B on there. Okay, cool. And here's C, and you're only allowed to have this much C of pesticide C to use safely on your food residue and have it left on your food. Okay, great. So they set these limits, and that's wonderful. But I can take my safe level of pesticide A, and I can take my safe level of pesticide B, and I can take my safe level of pesticide C, and I can put them together, and I can use them all at one time. And I didn't break any laws. They don't look at the totality. They don't look at the total accumulus. They don't look at, oh my God, you're using pesticide A, B, and C together. Well, we don't think, that's not safe. But that's a loophole, and that's what industry and agriculture do to grow better crops. Because don't get me wrong, pesticides work. Pesticides are very, very, very effective. They're very cheap for the most part. They are the most effective way to kill pests fast and grow more food. It's just the way it is. But you have to look at the other side of it when you're talking about pesticides because it's huge. There is another sound clip. So I want you to check that out. It talks about how to wash fruit or produce, and it's very interesting. Some people will just, grab fruit and start eating it. That's great. Some people will throw it under the water for a second. That's not super useful. Some people will wash them with soap and water, which is okay, but leaving soap residue on fruit and produce, and ingesting soap isn't the best thing for your digestive system, so that's not a good idea. Typically, I don't. Typically, they'll use a vinegar water mixture, and vinegar is very effective at getting off that pesticide residue. So listen to that sound clip. The graphic on slide 8, the picture here, it says pesticides in produce, right? And on the left side, you have this dirty dozen. You have the worst. You have the ones that typically have the most pesticide residue on them when you go and shop and buy these things. And then on the right, you have the cleanest 12 or so that are usually safer. So let me tell you about how I interpreted this. I always thought that um, if the fruit or produce was porous, if it was spongy, a strawberry, then it would be more likely to absorb pesticide and it would be more dangerous. And things like apples that have the skin all the way around it, sort of protecting the porous layer of the fruit, I thought would be easier to get the pesticides off of and to not be the most content. And when you look at this, it's not, that doesn't work. That my philosophy that I've always thought would make sense doesn't make sense here, because you have things that are porous on the clean side. Bananas, I used to think were, I always bought organic bananas for my kid. Doesn't seem like they're too bad. Kiwis are very porous. So there are, cabbage and broccoli. You would think the pesticides would get stuck in there, but typically not, right? So that wasn't right. My idea wasn't right. So I thought about it. I looked at the list and I thought about it, right? Just like you should be doing. You should be thinking about things. I'm looking at it. I'm saying, okay, what the heck could it be? And then I kind of come to another theory that the pests, what do pests like? Most of the pests, when you think about, the left side is what pests enjoy. It's what they eat. It's what they like. Where the right side is less enjoyable. There's not a lot of pests that will go after onions. Onions have that chemical and that taste. Pests don't enjoy. Avocados are grown in an area of the world where there's not a lot of pests, right? So I think that has something to do with it. Like it's the pests enjoy the dirty dozen food more than the cleanest, so they have to use more pesticides on the left-hand side than they do on the right-hand side, which would cause it to accumulate on them. That's my theory. I'm not sure if it's right. But they always say on the dirty dozen side, you can always buy organic. Now, we haven't talked about organic yet, but we always know organic fruit, organic produce, organic stuff, certified organic stuff is grown without any kind of chemicals or pesticides. All right. They may use natural pesticides, which we'll talk about, but they don't use any chemicals, right? Which is great. It's not a fail safe, though. It's not perfect. But if you're going and you feel better about buying organic, and you're going to eat cherries and you're going to eat lettuce, buying organic is a good idea. It's more expensive, but couldn't hurt. That's the way I look at it. Doesn't help a lot, but it couldn't hurt. All right, 9. Slide 9. Here's a weird one. So 3% of Americans tested by the CDC. We all know about the CDC. 3% of the Americans tested, and that's a lot. When you think about how many Americans there are, 3% is a huge number. Tested by the CDC had metabolites, parts of a banned a banned pesticide in their urine called chloropyrifos. It's a neurotoxic insecticide, very dangerous, so it was banned. It was found to cause a lot of problems with humans, so it was banned. I'm not sure when it was, but 3% of Americans, after it's banned, 3% of Americans tested still had this in their urine. That's interesting. Then I look at the next one, and it's even freakier. DDT. DDT is historically a very common pesticide. It was used all through the 60s. It was the most popular one. It was super effective, and it was super, super dangerous. It caused all kinds of developmental issues in kids and neurodevelopmental and birth defects. And it ain't good. You don't want it in your system, right? So they banned it in 1972. Now, remember when we talk, historically speaking, about all our stuff, we always say people didn't wake up until the late 70s and the early 80s, and that's when Earth Day started kicking in, and that's when all the legislation started kicking in to protect our environment and all that. This is 72. This is before that. This one people didn't give a crap. So that's telling you right there that this was some bad stuff, and they knew it, and it was blatant, and they said, we got to get rid of it, right? So they banned it in 72. Since they banned it in 72, 99% of Americans now tested positive for DDT degradants. If they banned it in 1972, how the hell is it still pieces of it? How the hell is it still popping up in me or you who were born 20 years after 1972? How does that even happen? Or even 30 years, right? When the heck were you guys born? I don't know, late 90s. All right, so that is weird. How does that happen? Well, when I think about it, I think about a company making billions of dollars with this DDT thing, and in the 60s, and then all of a sudden they ban it. Well, this company's gonna be like, oh, shucks, I'll just pack up and, I'm done. No, that's not how it works. So maybe scientists at the company, maybe they had them restructure the molecule. Maybe they named their pesticide something different. Maybe they just did a couple little tweaks where it was no longer DDT, but it was something different. I'm not going to get too into it because you're going to be doing a little research later. But who knows? It could have been just trickery, right? There was something, and I don't know it specifically, so I might mess it up a little bit, but there's something in the gasoline industry where in the 80s or something, or in the 90s, gas was really, there was something about gasoline at gas stations that the public was going nuts on, that it was polluting something. And the oil companies, the gas companies, instead of changing, they said, okay, what we're going to do is we're just going to add another ingredient. It wasn't clean or something, it wasn't clean energy. So they said, if we just add another ingredient, we can say that we've cleaned it up, and now we can relabel it and call it something different. Oh, now there's ethanol in it, and it's less dangerous to the environment. Where they didn't do anything. All they did was change the structure, or they added something to the gasoline to make it more friendly, but it isn't. It's the same thing. Right? It'd be like painting cigarettes pink so they look nicer, so they must be better for you. It doesn't make any damn sense. So they do things. They're swindlers. They're trying to make money. They're trying to switch things around, and I feel like that's what's happening, because still almost 100%, which in a couple slides is going to be even worse. But scientists don't have a clear understanding of the health effects of these pesticide residues. Still on slide 9. What they know is pesticides in their regular form are very, very dangerous. When they start to break down, when they have byproducts, when there's pieces of them, how dangerous is that if you're just ingesting and taking that in? That's one of the questions that they always are trying to answer and investigate. All right, moving to slide 10. Pesticides can have a cumulative toxic loading. What toxic loading is everybody metabolizes things different. Everybody's system works a little different, right? You can tell that when you take medicines, right? Like sometimes if you take a medicine, it really, really knocks you out, and it does nothing to this person or that person. Or like I know I can take an Advil PM, the nighttime Advil, and it doesn't knock me out or put me to sleep. If my wife takes one, she's like a zombie. She's out like a light. So, our bodies metabolize things differently. Same thing with pesticides. When we get these chemicals in our body wants to get rid of them, break them down, get rid of them. Some people can do that effectively. Some people cannot. So what happens is these pesticides can you can have this toxic loading where they accumulate and you're not getting rid of them fast enough, right? So that can make that can make your system, that can cause a lot of issues in your cells. Evidence suggests that children are very susceptible to this. Again, children, small children, getting this in, the amount compared to their body weight and their mass, the amount is going to be a more concentrated version, so it's going to be more dangerous for them. Neurodevelopmental effects. Think about your nervous system, controls everything, your brain and your muscles and everything else. So if you're having neurodevelopmental effects from these pesticides, it could be very dangerous. Okay, and then we have slide 11. This is the hard-hitting one. When we think about all of our societal problems, some of the big ones that stick out, right? Autism is off the charts. The autism rates have risen dramatically in the last 20 years, like exponentially. ADHD, it seems like, from my generation on down, every, 1 out of 3 people have ADHD. So that's a big thing. We have obviously cancer, right? Disease that's been around and is linked to many, many different things. Infertility, breast cancer for women has grown in a exponential way as well in the last couple of decades. So These are the major societal, a lot of the major societal issues that we have as far as disease or as far as ailments. And when you look at this list here, you can see that pesticides play an important role in a lot of these things. So, an entire class of pesticides in this first bullet, called organophosphates, they've been linked to high rates of ADHD. That's interesting. Um, and this just means that, when they test people with ADHD, that this pesticide shows up more often than not, so that they link it together. The herbicide atrazine is found in 94% of our water supply. It's freaking everywhere. It's linked to birth defects, infertility, cancer. You can't get away from it, right? And women exposed to this other pesticide, endosulfan, during pregnancy are more likely to have an autistic child. That's huge. Girls exposed to DDT, the one that we said 99% of Americans, the big one, girls exposed to DDT before puberty are 5 times more likely to develop breast cancer. That's big. Um, and this is where I'm going to flop back a couple, and I'm not literally, but when we were talking before and we started talking about um, organic stuff is great, right? And it's buy organic if you can afford it, if you feel good about it, buy organic. But just because you buy organic apples and organic bananas and organic lettuce, you can't sit there and say that, you're not getting any pesticides. Pesticides are in the air, pesticides are in the water, right? They're using pesticides on corn and on wheat, and corn and wheat are in everything, so you're not avoiding them, right? You may not be, you're taking out one of the variables. Think about an equation that has 20 variables and you're taking out one. It's not going to do much of a difference. You are getting these pesticides whether you want to or not, and that's what sucks. When you're pregnant, when you're whatever, when you want to be healthy, right? When you're like, let's take pregnancy for instance, or even not pregnancy. We know smoking causes lung cancer, right? So if I don't want lung cancer, right, I don't have to put the cigarette in my mouth. That's a choice if I choose to smoke, right? If I'm pregnant and I know alcohol causes birth defects or smoking causes birth defects, I don't drink the alcohol. I don't smoke the cigarettes or do the drugs, right? You have choices. With pesticides, you don't have a choice because they're there. They're in the water, they're in the air, they're in your food. You don't have a choice. And that's what really sucks, right? It's not up to you. And that's what we need government agencies to do to protect us. We need government agencies to really step in and regulate this stuff because no one cares about you when they're making billions, and it really sucks. And it's so easy. There's these propaganda people that work at these industries, and they say, oh well, sure, DDT may be this pesticide may be linked to ADHD, but there's so many other reasons why someone might have ADHD if they were exposed to this, if they had too much sugar, if they did this. So they'll go out and they'll launch this huge propaganda thing. Well, they'll say, well, this might be one of the little components, but it's not dangerous enough for us to not use it, right? So there's all this stuff. 94% of our water supply has this herbicide in it, right? Well, the herbicide it affects plants. Why would it affect humans? And there's a lot of other things in the water besides this little pesticide that could be causing birth defects. We don't know. So there's a lot of that crap going on. And that's just, to me, that's bull. Because if you know that it contributes to these things, you should get rid of it. And if we were thought that way and we got rid of all the variables that we thought were linked to a certain disease or ailment, it might be helpful, but we don't do that. All right, slide 12. Slide 12 is the last real slide here. And here's the kicker. So we do all this, and pesticides are useful. They are useful in certain amounts. They are very effective. They are very cheap. So I'm not saying that pesticides should just be, we wouldn't have enough food without pesticides, certain pesticides. We would have a lot of problems growing food. So yes, there are safe levels. There are things you can do. There are ways you can regulate it and keep an eye on it. We don't do all that, so it becomes a problem. But pests, here's the best part. A lot of pests are becoming resistant to the pesticides. So in bio, you talked about a thing called antibiotic resistance. And you get bacteria in you and you take antibiotics and you kill the bacteria, right? So that's what antibiotics are for, to kill the bacteria. Well, bacteria reproduce very quickly. And remember, all DNAs, all it's the same DNA. It's all rearranged differently. So some of these bacteria could have some sort of mutation or evolve some sort of something in their DNA, which would make them resistant to the antibiotic. So now a couple bacteria live, and then they reproduce bacteria that also have the resistance, and then they reproduce and they reproduce. And now all of a sudden you have a huge population of bacteria that are resistant to the antibiotics. Same thing with pests and pesticides. You have insects that are dying when you put the pesticide on, but there are some insects that their DNA is a little different. There's a random mutation. There's something that makes them not die when that pesticide is put on them. They grow up because they didn't die. They grow up, they reproduce, they have babies, and in that DNA of their children, they've most likely passed on whatever that is, that gene, that mutation, whatever it is that makes them resistant to the pesticide, right? And then eventually, more and more and more, they grow up, they have more, and then you have this huge community of pests that are resistant to the pesticides. Problem. So this slide says in the 40s, farmers in the USA lost about 7% of their crops to pests, right? So they were using pesticides, but still lost about 7% of their crops, which they said, that's totally acceptable. 93% yield is pretty good. And then what happened? Well, that number started to creep up, 8%, 1 year. And then 1 year, maybe they lost 9% or 10%. They're saying, I'm losing a little more. So what should I do? I'm going to use more pesticides. Let's put more on, right? So by the 80s, that number had risen to 13% of lost crops due to pests, even though they were using more and more and more pesticides, because that number was going up, and they figured they would mitigate that and make it go down by adding more pesticide, right? It wasn't happening. So what do we figure out? We figure out that these pests, that there is this population of pests that are immune or resist that pesticide. So the pesticide is useless no matter how much you put on in certain situations. It's estimated that there are about 500 different pests that bother agricultural crops that have developed resistance to pesticides since the 40s. So what do? We try to use a different pesticide, right? Because when one antibiotic doesn't work, you go back to the doctor and they give you a different antibiotic and see if that one works and see if the bacteria was resistant to that one too, right? So now all of a sudden, this pesticide's not working on my crop. I'm going to switch to a different pesticide. I'm going to switch to a different pesticide. And that, I suspect, I thought a lot about this when I was going through it. That, I suspect, might be why DDT is magically still around. DDT was super, super, super effective, right? That would give you this 7% or under loss to pests, right? So that would bring you back to 1940s number, which means more money for you, right? So maybe the DDT is popping up in places where it shouldn't be popping up, because all of these other pesticides, although they're working well, pests can become resistant to them. So that was just something I thought about when I was going through it. All right. So there are the slides. When you go to slide 13, it says guided practice, but what slide 13 is a 2 YouTube clips. One is 2 minutes, one's 4 minutes. The first one is called Pesticide Drift. Watch that. It's very interesting. Might pop up on a quiz or test, so definitely check that out. The 4-minute video, the other one is Bee Aware. We know bees are very important. If bees disappear, our food production, our agricultural crops, we are going to have a huge, huge food shortage, because bees do a lot of pollination. They do a lot of things for our crops. So if they go away, it's a problem. And we know that they're having a problem. So and also the whole Be Aware thing, a lot of pesticides are affecting the bees, and that's why they're disappearing. So watch that video, 4 minutes, pretty interesting. Chalet would love it because he's a beet nut. When you go to the independent practice, so this is what you're doing, right? So that's slide 14. So that's where I am now. The slides, I go through them. I try to break them down. If you're watching and it's useful, that's good. That is where all the questions from the quizzes come from, right? I put 2 sound clips up there for you. They're very quick sound clips, but they talk about the crop dusting and washing fruit, and those are interesting. The 2 videos, check out, because you never know when they're going to pop up. So you should be doing all that. You should be looking through that stuff. You should be reading through it and understanding each slide. And it wasn't too difficult. Know the different types of pesticides. What you're doing, turning in, all that stuff is this on slide 14. You are going to research a pesticide. And that's why I didn't get too far into DDT when I was talking about it. You're going to research a pesticide of your choosing. So like I said, DDT is a big one. It's historically very significant. So you can check that one out, or you can go off the beaten path. A quick Google of pesticides used, you get a huge list. So look through them, see which one speaks to you, see which one's badass or whatever you want, and take that. And we're not doing another essay. I know I just gave you an essay. We're doing a paragraph. We're doing 4 or 5 sentences. We're doing, whatever it is, it is. We're not doing an essay here. I'm not asking for that. But choose your pesticide, and in your paragraph, I want you to tell me what it was intended to do. And all this information is on slide 14. I want you to know tell me what it was intended to do. So somebody made this with good thinking, with science, with an idea, with, okay, this is why we're making it, right? So what was it intended to do? The positive side of it. And then, of course, give me a little bit of information of what actually happened, or was it linked to anything? Was it effective? Was it linked to anything dangerous? Any kind of health repercussions, right? And just sort of give me a wrap up. So tell me what it was, what it is, what was it intended to do, what it actually did, and if it should be used, should be banned, or how it should be applied to agriculture. Right? So it's quick. It's 4 or 5 sentences. It's not an essay. Give me more. You want to write an essay? Feel free. But I'm not looking for some huge pros versus cons. I'm looking for a nice paragraph. And I want it in your own words. I don't want to copy and paste of anything like that. So don't give me something that has vocabulary in it that I have to look up, whatever. But put it in your own words. Right? So that information is on slide 14. That's it for the slides. It's it for pesticides. I wanted to go outside. I wish I could YouTube live outside on my phone, but I don't have 1,000 subscribers, and 1,000 subscribers is the minimum you need to be able to go live on mobile. So I'm stuck in my house doing these live things, but live is important. I've been told that I have to do live just in case you need real-time information. But I will get back to the videos outside because those are really good tutorials, I think. I can definitely talk a lot about pesticides and show you some stuff. So I might put together a video clip that I'll post up later today. Other than that, you have this. Remember, this is 4th cycle, in case you just joined. This is 4th cycle stuff. So my 3rd cycle grades are there already, except for the blank one, which is the essay, the genetic engineering essay. So that grade should be in there soon, and that's going to be it for 3rd cycle. Then we have this for 4th cycle and anything else. We're looking at a quiz on a bunch of the material we went over for agriculture. We're looking at a quiz not the next time we meet, I'll remind you, and we'll review, and then the next time we meet. So I think it's a week from today, but we'll look at it. All right, I'm out of here. You've still got about 15 minutes left in this class period, so you can look at those video clips, the video and the audio clips on here, and start your work. I'm here all day. Do not forget that. I'm here in the morning all the way till 3:30. So, and I check a couple times at night because I'm bored. So private message me if you have any issues, any questions, anything you need to talk about. I know they just set up Google Meet in Classroom. So we could always go in the classroom and we could Google Meet if it has to be a one-to-one kind of thing. All right. So that is it. Go back and check the video out again later if you have to. And if you have any questions, please shout out to me via private message. I will talk to you soon. I hope you're all being safe. I hope you're all staying calm. I hope you're all being smart. We're going to get through this. It's not going to be a problem. And hopefully, I get to see you silly seniors and a couple juniors before the end of this year. We will talk soon. Take care.